Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast is a deep dive into real English conversation.
That's right.
Our advanced English lesson topic is 50 plus polite ways to say no in English you must know.
We're plunging into, one of the most common challenges, really, both emotionally and professionally.
The struggle to just say no.
Exactly. This deep dive is all about giving you the linguistic tools, but also the thinking behind it. So you can set those boundaries with, confidence and maybe even a bit of grace.
It really is more than just words, isn't it? It's about managing your resources. Because that core struggle you mentioned, that feeling that saying no means you're being unhelpful or rude or ungrateful.
Yeah, that guilt.
That guilt, it holds so many people back. It really does.
Absolutely. And the default reaction so often is this kind of hesitant yes, maybe out of anxiety. And then later you realize, oh man, I've overcommitted. I've compromised what I was already doing, maybe even compromised myself.
But the liberating truth, and this is really the mission today, isn't it? The goal isn't just avoiding the word no.
Yeah.
It's learning how to say it politely, effectively, mastering it.
And when you do get that delivery right, the whole dynamic shifts. You start to see that setting boundaries is actually, it's affirming your current commitments. It's about your capacity. It's not actually a rejection of the person asking.
It's a protection.
It's an act of protection.
Exactly.
For yourself and your existing responsibilities.
So we're swapping guilt for strategy here. We're building you, the listener, a really complete toolkit, hopefully comprehensive, for declining things with confidence, whatever the situation.
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this first. Before we even get to the specific phrases, the actual words, let's talk foundations. Why is this so hard emotionally for so many people if it's, logically necessary?
Well, I think that difficulty often comes from a misunderstanding, doesn't it? People link no with conflict or maybe letting someone down, disappointment.
Yeah.
We need to shift that thinking, move away from seeing it as an emotional judgment and look at it more logically. It's about resource allocation. It's about managing yourself, really. Self-stewardship.
Resource allocation. So what exactly are we protecting when we say no? What are these core resources?
Well, the most obvious ones are your time and your energy. I mean, think about it. Time and energy are finite.
Right.
You only have so much.
Right, like currency.
Exactly like currency. If you say yes purely out of obligation, especially when you're already running on fumes, you're basically guaranteeing burnout later. And the really insidious thing about those obligated yeses is that they almost always breed resentment, stress, exhaustion down the line. You end up resenting the person who asked, maybe the task itself, and even yourself for agreeing.
That internal resentment, that's a really powerful point. It kind of poisons the well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Probably makes the work you eventually do.
Worse. It absolutely does. Which leads to the second thing you're protecting. You're setting boundaries. By being clear about your limits, you're actively teaching others how to interact with you. Professionally, personally, both.
Teaching them, how so?
Well, think about it. If you always drop everything to help a colleague, immediately, no questions asked. You're training them, essentially, to expect that immediate, unconditional availability from you.
Oh, okay, I see.
But when you decline, clearly and politely, you start managing their expectations. And that's crucial for any sustainable, respectful relationship, whether it's work or personal life.
So it's like a subtle kind of behavioral training for the people around us. We're defining the rules of engagement in a way.
That's a really good way to put it, yeah. Defining the terms. And managing those terms leads straight to the third big benefit. You actually become more effective. Your quality improves.
How did that work? Seems counterintuitive, maybe.
There's a pretty direct inverse relationship here. The more you overcommit, the more your quality gets diluted. It just has to.
They spread too thin.
Exactly. So by having the courage to say no to things that are, non-essential or maybe tangential or just lower priority for you, you free up the capacity to give your core commitments the focus they deserve. You deliver higher quality where it actually counts the most.
I think a lot of professionals get caught in that trap. They think just doing more, the quantity of effort, equals value. But like you said, if I spread myself across 10 things and do them all kind of half-baked.
You're just a low-impact employee or a friend or partner.
Precisely.
And the final benefit, which often surprises people, is that setting clear boundaries actually builds respect. Genuine respect.
Really? You'd think saying no might annoy people.
In the short term, maybe a flicker. But long term, people ultimately have more respect for those who are clear, confident, honest, reliable about what they can and can't do, much more than the chronic yes person who's always stressed, often late, maybe unreliable because they took on too much. Clarity and confidence, they're intrinsically linked to how much respect you command.
Okay, so mastering this polite refusal thing, it sounds less like just avoiding tasks and much more about maximizing the value, the impact of the things we actually do choose to commit to.
It's the ultimate strategic move for managing your life and work. It really is.
Right, let's get practical then. Let's move into the actual language. We need those versatile kind of all-purpose phrases, don't we? The ones that work in fairly informal or maybe semi-formal situations, where you need a quick, polite no, but you don't need to write a whole essay explaining why.
Exactly. And the starting point for almost all polite refusals is analyzing the structure. You almost always want to start with some kind of acknowledgement, gratitude, maybe appreciation, or even just empathy. Something to soften the blow before you deliver the no.
The gratitude sandwich idea.
That's the one. You start with something positive, deliver the gentle no in the middle, and sometimes you can even follow up with another positive note or alternative, but the key is that opening buffer.
Makes sense. The thank you takes the edge off the rejection. Okay, give us some classic examples, the universal ones built on that structure.
Okay, a really standard, versatile one is, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I can't this time. Simple.
Okay.
That works for so many things. Declining a social invite, maybe a request to join a committee, even, a small collaboration offer. You acknowledge the thought, then state the limit. Boom.
And maybe something a bit more conversational for friends or, lighter requests.
You could try something like, thank you for the offer, I'll have to pass. That's great for, say, turning down an invitation to join a new social group, or maybe helping coordinate a small one-off event. It's polite, it's short, and it doesn't really invite further discussion.
Nice and clean.
Another really gentle option, maybe a bit warmer. That sounds wonderful, but I'm just not able to make it work right now.
I notice a pattern in a lot of these. They use language that focuses on inability, right? It frames the no as more of a logistical thing or a timing constraint rather than I don't want to. Why is that strategic?
Because it makes it less personal, much less personal. When you say something like, I wish I could, but I can't, you're conveying genuine regret, or at least you sound like you are.
Right.
So for instance, if a friend asks for help moving house on a weekend you're already swamped, this phrasing implies, my heart's in the right place, but the logistics just don't line up. You're signaling the boundary is sort of external, not internal dislike.
Okay, yeah, that feels different. What are some other phrases in that category?
Let's see. Unfortunately, I won't be able to fit that in. That's pretty good for minor work requests.
Okay.
Or, I'm sorry, I'm unavailable at that time. Perfect for just clear scheduling clashes. No ambiguity.
Simple.
Or maybe a bit more informal. I'd love to, but my schedule is just locked up solid. Sets a clear boundary.
Right. What about those times when you need to be a little more direct? Maybe cut to the chase a bit, especially with scheduling stuff. Or perhaps dealing with requests that keep coming up.
Yeah, sometimes you need that clarity without wrapping it up too much. Focus on the functional refusal. Something like, that doesn't work for me, is brilliant for turning down a specific meeting time someone suggested.
Oh, I like that. It's direct, but not rude.
Exactly. It's professional, it's brief, and crucially, it doesn't invite negotiation about why it doesn't work. It just states a fact.
It's just a logistical reality.
Okay. And for, say, new commitments, new projects people suggest, you need a phrase that closes the door gently but firmly. I'm afraid I can't commit to that right now.
The right now part is key there, isn't it?
It is. It acknowledges the request, maybe keeps a tiny possibility open for the distant future without actually promising anything vague, but it very clearly establishes the boundary for today.
What if the request is, much bigger? Say someone asks you to join a year-long mentorship program, something with a big-time commitment. How do you say no gracefully without maybe burning a bridge entirely?
In that case, you'd combine the thank you with a slightly more detailed but still soft inability statement. Something like, I truly appreciate the invitation to the program. That's very kind, but I'm just oversubscribed for the remainder of this year.
Okay.
Or perhaps I'm simply not taking on any new long-term commitments at the moment. See, that clarifies the issue isn't the program itself or its value, but the duration or the timing of the request in relation to your current capacity.
Gotcha. So this whole section gives us a really versatile core toolkit. It relies on starting with gratitude, often framing it as logistical inability, and using clear, concise language, maintaining that professional distance when needed.
That's the foundation. Simple, polite, effective for many everyday situations. Okay, now this next section is really critical, especially in a professional environment. When the reason you have to say no is purely down to being too busy, your language needs to be, well, firm, but also honest. It needs to reflect that heavy workload without just sounding like a vague excuse.
Right, you can't just say I'm busy 50 times a day.
Exactly. We need language that signals you're at full capacity, often using metaphors that people in the workplace instantly understand.
This is where it gets really interesting for me, actually, because we're talking about communicating quite complex professional constraints, but using figurative language. So, what are the most effective metaphorical phrases for saying I'm swamped?
Well, the absolute classic, the foundation, is the full plate metaphor. If you say, my plate is really full right now, pretty much everyone in a professional setting gets it immediately. They understand you're juggling existing demands.
Yeah, it's a very common one.
So if your manager asks you to take on some new ad hoc task, you could respond, I'd like to help with that, but I am fully committed with the Q4 deep dive analysis right now. Honestly, my plate won't allow me to add anything else without something slipping.
Okay, that immediately frames the refusal, not as you trying to avoid work, but as you recognizing your limits so you can maintain performance on what's already agreed upon.
Precisely. And then there's its slightly more sophisticated sibling, which I think is pretty much mandatory vocabulary for any modern professional these days, talking about bandwidth.
Ah, yes, bandwidth. I find that one fascinating too, because it frames your capacity in very technical, almost resource management terms. Less personal, maybe.
Absolutely. Saying, I don't have the bandwidth for that at the moment suggests that your mental processing power, your technical capacity, it's all allocated to other higher priority streams of work right now.
So it sounds very objective.
Very objective. If a colleague asks for, say, detailed help on their separate project, that phrase is perfect. It implies a limitation of resources, not a lack of willingness or effort. It feels much more professional than just saying, sorry, I'm tired, or even just, I'm too busy.
That makes total sense. My plate is full. Could sometimes feel more about the sheer volume of tasks, maybe physical tasks. Bandwidth seems to point more towards cognitive load, the ability to take on new mental inputs.
You've nailed it. What about phrases that signal maybe more intense pressure when full plate doesn't quite cut it?
Yeah, sometimes you're beyond full. You're overflowing.
Right. Slightly more informal, perhaps, but still effective, especially within a team you know well. I'm currently swamped with the final deployment phase. Or maybe, I'm stretched pretty thin right now. I really can't take on anything new this week.
Okay.
These definitely communicate intensity. But a key tip here. You should always try to follow these kinds of phrases by briefly mentioning what is swamping you, like the deployment phase or the budget reports. It just reinforces the professionalism, makes it less of a vague complaint.
Good point. Grounded in specifics. Okay, moving beyond metaphors now. Let's talk about that technique you mentioned earlier. Prioritization refusals. It sounds powerful. Where the reason for the no is basically the importance of your existing yeses.
Yes, this is a real strategic power move in the workplace. You state clearly what you are focusing on, and that focus inherently justifies the decline for the new request.
How does that sound in practice?
Something like, I appreciate you asking me to join that task force, but I really must focus on delivering the high-priority client migration project this week. That's my #1 deliverable right now. See, by naming the priority, you elevate the boundary. It's not just a personal issue of being busy, it's a strategic decision.
Okay, but what happens if the requester, maybe especially if it's a manager or a senior colleague, pushes back? What if they say, well, why is that project more important than what I'm asking you to do? That feels like where the real challenge comes in.
That's a tough spot, but manageable. If you encounter that pushback, you need a response that's firm, non-apologetic, and ideally rooted in some kind of agreed-upon structure, like policy or goals. You could say, well, I'm currently following the departmental roadmap we established for this quarter, which clearly designates Project A as the top priority for my role. To accommodate this new request, we'd likely need to formally reassess that roadmap and potentially adjust the priorities.
Ooh, I like that. You're making the decline about a collective strategy discussion, not just your personal preference or capacity. You're pushing the decision back up the chain, in a way, without sounding directly resistant.
Exactly. It reframes it. Another angle here is using phrases focused on maintaining quality. Declining a task because you know you wouldn't be able to give it the proper effort is actually highly respectful, both to the task and the requester.
How would you phrase that?
Something like, "Thank you for thinking of me for this complex analysis, but knowing my current workload, I honestly wouldn't be able to give it the detailed attention it really deserves right now." This works perfectly if someone asks you to take on, say, a new mentee when you're already overloaded or do some very detailed side project.
It implies you respect the task itself and you respect your own standard of quality too much to do a poor job.
Absolutely. It's about integrity. Other options that signal this kind of resource scarcity could be, "I've actually reached my capacity limit for taking on external requests this month." That's clear and sets a time boundary.
Temporal, yeah.
Or a bit more formal. "To maintain the integrity of my current project scheduling commitments, I unfortunately need to decline this new task," or even providing a timeline. "I am fully committed to my current deliverables until, say, the end of next week. Perhaps we could discuss this then."
Okay, so the common thread running through all of these capacity-based refusals is really using the language of, like, resource management, strategic focus, quality control. It demonstrates the no is a calculated decision to maximize overall output, not just you trying to get out of doing work.
That's the essence of it, professionalism and strategy.
Okay, so one of the biggest underlying goals, I think, when we're mastering the polite refusal is trying to maintain goodwill, right? Keep relationships positive.
Absolutely crucial.
So this next section feels really key. It's about how we can soften the blow of a no, maybe mitigate the finality of it, perhaps by offering a future possibility or redirecting the request somewhere else, or even just buying ourselves a bit more time to think. This seems like where the real art of relationship management comes in.
This is definitely moving into the more advanced tier of boundary setting, I'd say. We can categorize these soft no strategies into roughly 3 types. There's deferral, referral, and what we might call conditional refusal or buying time.
Okay, let's start with deferral. Offering a future possibility. How do we do that effectively without just giving some vague, non-committal promise that never actually happens? People see through that, right?
Oh, definitely. Vague promises are worse than useless. The key is to suggest a specific and hopefully realistic timeline if you genuinely think you might be able to help later. So not just maybe later, but something concrete.
Like what?
Like, I really can't commit the time needed for that right now, but perhaps we could revisit this discussion on the 1st of next month when the current project wraps up. Or if it's a smaller, more time-sensitive request, look, I can't properly review that full report today, but I could give it a quick 15-minute look late on Friday afternoon if that helps.
Okay, so you're setting a clear boundary for the present. I can't do it now, but you're providing a concrete potential relief date in the future. That acknowledges the request's importance, but still prioritizes your current workload.
Precisely. What if the request is much bigger, though? Like, someone flits a proposal for a really long-term project collaboration.
Yeah, something you can't just squeeze in next Friday.
Right. For those larger long-term ideas, you use a correspondingly longer delay in your deferral. Something like, "That sounds like an interesting proposal, but my team's availability is extremely limited this quarter due to the X initiative. Let's perhaps formally revisit this idea early next quarter when we expect our resources to free up a bit."
That maintains a respectful distance, keeps the door slightly ajar strategically, but firmly protects your current quarter's focus.
Exactly. Okay, next strategy, the referral. This one can be incredibly powerful because it turns what could be seen as a personal rejection into a genuinely helpful act for the requester.
So instead of just saying no, you're pointing them towards someone or something that can help them.
Yes. The referral is so valuable because you're essentially communicating, okay, I personally can't help you with this specific thing, but I am still going to help you solve your underlying problem by connecting you with the right resource.
That's clever. What's the core phrasing?
The core phrase is something along the lines of, "I'm actually not the best person to help with this, but I strongly recommend you speak to person X in department Y. They specialize in exactly that area."
Right. Of course, that requires you to actually know your network reasonably well, or at least know where to point people generally. Like, if someone asks you about a specific coding issue you don't handle.
You'd say, that specific API call is really beyond my current scope, I'm afraid. But I know Sarah in the development team is the absolute expert on that. Have you tried reaching out to her?
Perfect.
Or using phrases like, "That's not really in my wheelhouse, unfortunately, but I know Alex is the go-to person for anything related to the new database integration." It ensures you maintain your own focus, but the request doesn't just hit a brick wall with you. You become seen as a helpful connector.
Which, paradoxically, probably strengthens your professional relationships, even though you said no to the direct request.
Absolutely, it builds social capital. Okay, finally, the third strategy, conditional refusal, or basically buying time. This is essential for those moments when you feel pressured to give an answer immediately, maybe a yes on the spot, but you honestly lack the information you need to properly understand the commitment.
The ambush request. We've all been there.
Exactly. This strategy is all about putting the burden of providing clarity back onto the requester before you commit. The simplest form is just the strategic delay tactic.
How does that sound?
Just a simple, that's an interesting idea. I'll need to think about the logistics of that, or let me check my calendar in capacity, or can I take a look at that proposal properly and get back to you tomorrow?
Okay, that buys you what, 24, maybe 48 hours? Enough time to calmly assess it and then, if necessary, formulate a really clear, well-reasoned no, rather than giving that panicked yes in the moment.
Precisely. It prevents the immediate cave-in. But what about when the request itself is just really vague? The scope is totally undefined.
Yeah, can you help me with this project? What project? Oh, the big one.
Right. In those cases, you need to demand clarification as an absolute prerequisite for even considering commitment. You use phrases like, okay, before I can even think about committing any time to this, I really need more details about the expected time investment per week. Or, could you possibly send me over a clear scope of work document and maybe the budget breakdown for this? That last one is crucial for managing requests from above.
Demanding the budget, nice.
Or even more directly, I simply can't confirm my involvement until I have a clearer understanding of mention the specific missing information, e.g., the key deadlines, the exact deliverables required.
So, by demanding that information first, you're essentially making any potential yes conditional on the feasibility and clarity of the request itself, if they can't provide the necessary scope or details.
Then the answer remains no, by default, and frankly, the lack of clarity is their issue to solve, not yours to guess at. It shifts the accountability right back where it belongs.
I love that. You're communicating. Look, I'm willing to evaluate this seriously, but I absolutely will not commit blindly to something undefined. That feels like a very effective way to manage that dreaded project creep and those vague expectations people sometimes throw around.
It's essential for professional self-preservation.
Okay, we've kind of saved the really big ones, the highest stakes, for this section. We're talking about situations where the request, if you agree to it, could significantly impact your career, maybe your financial well-being, or even just your deep personal peace and boundaries.
Yeah, these are the no's that often feel the hardest, but are arguably the most important to get right.
And the language here needs to be super carefully tailored, doesn't it? You need absolute clarity, you need the boundary to hold firm, but ideally without causing unnecessary emotional fallout or relationship damage if possible.
That's the tightrope walk. And this is where we often see a necessary shift in tone. In those really formal professional contexts, leaning on conciseness, maybe referencing structure or policy, is often key. Whereas in the really personal context, sometimes raw honesty about your internal needs is actually the most powerful approach.
Okay, let's tackle the professional side first. When you need to decline something significant in a work context, what are the phrases that act like, a linguistic fortress, an impenetrable wall?
For the most formal and unambiguous situations, the classic phrase is simply, I must respectfully decline.
Respectfully decline, okay. When would you typically use that one?
That's reserved for pretty significant things. Maybe turning down an unsuitable job offer after an interview process, perhaps declining a formal proposal to merge departments if you're in management, or responding to a very formal request that you simply cannot or will not agree to for strategic or ethical reasons. It's definitive, no wiggle room.
Got it, very clear. What about those recurring scheduling conflicts that just keep causing problems, maybe with a client or another department? How do you put your foot down firmly but professionally?
There, you want to root your refusal in some kind of established order or prior commitment, something like, unfortunately, due to prior commitments that are already locked in and the necessary scheduling sequence for Project X, I am unable to agree to that revised timeline. It suggests the decision isn't arbitrary. It's based on upholding an existing, larger system.
Makes it sound less personal, more structural. Okay, let's revisit that tricky issue of scope creep, but with more professional firmness. Let's say a manager assigns you a task that is quite clearly not part of your defined responsibilities. How do you refuse that respectfully without just sounding uncooperative or lazy?
This is crucial. You absolutely must use objective, almost policy-driven language if possible. The go-to phrase is something like, "Thank you for thinking of me for this, but that task actually falls outside the scope of my current responsibilities as outlined in my job description," or maybe outside the scope of our contracted deliverables for this project phase.
Wow, okay, that's direct.
It has to be sometimes. You're not rejecting the effort or the task's validity. You are stating a structural fact this task is assigned to the wrong role or function. It politely forces the manager to reconsider. Do they need to formally adjust your role, reassign the task, or maybe just drop it?
Yeah, that definitely shifts the conversation from, are you willing, to, is this organizational correct?
Yeah,
Very different.
exactly. Now, dealing with clients, especially highly demanding or maybe unreasonable client requests, you need to be assertive, but usually while maintaining a veneer of customer service.
Tricky balance.
Very. You might say something like, "I understand your request. However, I will not be able to accommodate that specific change as it exceeds the parameters of our original service agreement." Or perhaps slightly softer, focusing on resources. Unfortunately, we do not have the capacity within the current project budget and timeline to fulfill that additional request.
Again, grounding it in the existing agreement or resources.
Always. And finally, for those big opportunities, maybe declining a major collaboration proposal, a partnership offer, or deciding not to go with a vendor after a pitch.
Yeah, how do you let them down professionally?
There, you usually want to rely on strategic language, something like, "We really appreciate the time and effort you put into this excellent proposal. However, after careful consideration, we've determined that it's not the right strategic fit for our team's direction at this particular moment."
Okay, that shows you took it seriously, you evaluated it, but the decline is based on strategy, not necessarily the quality of their offer. It closes the door on this specific proposal, but tries to leave the door open for future relationships.
That's the goal. Maintain respect, provide closure.
All right, let's shift gears now to the personal realm. This is where the emotional stakes can feel even higher, I think. How do we prioritize our own self-care, saying no to family, to close friends without drowning in guilt ourselves, or making the other person feel deeply rejected?
This is so tough for so many people. I think the critical shift here often is moving away from making up external excuses, faking an appointment, pretending you're sick.
Yeah, the little white lies.
Those tend to backfire. They damage trust if discovered, and they require constant mental energy to maintain the facade. The more powerful, more authentic approach in personal life is often using "I need" statements.
I need statements. Why are those so effective?
Because they're essentially undeniable. They're rooted in your internal state, your genuine requirements for well-being. It's much harder for someone to argue with your stated need than it is to argue with a flimsy excuse.
Okay, give us some examples, some powerful I need phrases for personal boundaries.
Sure. If you're feeling overwhelmed and just need space, instead of inventing plans, you could say, "Thanks so much for the invite. That sounds fun, but I really need some quiet downtime this weekend just to recharge my battery."
Wise.
Or if you're trying to prioritize something important like family or rest, "I appreciate you asking, but I really need to prioritize my family time, my rest this week, so I'm going to have to skip the late night out." It's honest, it's clear, and it frames the refusal around your well-being, not as a rejection of them personally.
Yeah, the psychological impact of I need feels different. It signals a non-negotiable requirement for you to function properly, which, like you said, is much harder to argue against than just, "Oh, I'm kind of busy."
It really is. Now, for those really firm lines, the non-negotiable personal boundaries, maybe about topics you won't discuss or activities you won't participate in, you have to be utterly simple and direct, firm.
I mean, like what?
If someone keeps pushing an unwanted topic of conversation, perhaps something too personal or inappropriate, the most powerful phrases are often the shortest. "I'm not comfortable discussing that," full stop. Or, "Actually, that's not something I'm willing to participate in."
Wow. No apology, no explanation needed, just a clear boundary. They really close the conversation down immediately, but still respectfully.
That's the aim. And finally, what about those situations with, say, relatives or maybe certain friends who have a habit of regularly imposing or making unreasonable requests? You might need a phrase that sets a more permanent expectation.
A preemptive strike, almost.
Sort of. It's about normalizing your boundaries for the future. You might say, after declining a specific request, something like, "I love helping out when I can, but I really appreciate your understanding that I just can't always say yes to every request." Followed by the brief decline for the current thing. It gently prepares them for future refusals.
Establishing a general principle. I like that. Okay, one more category here. Sometimes the refusal needs to be incredibly simple, super fast, and highly direct. Think about dealing with a pushy salesperson, maybe unwanted attention, or even just someone offering you food you don't want. Here, maximum clarity probably trumps elaborate politeness, right?
Absolutely. In these situations, the primary goal is simply to terminate the interaction cleanly and quickly. For those general, unsolicited offers, salespeople at your door, someone offering you a flyer on the street, even just unwanted food offerings at a party, the simple, universal "no thank you" is usually perfectly sufficient.
Polite enough gets the job done.
Exactly. It closes the door instantly, minimal fuss, no real opening for follow-up questions.
Right. But what if the interaction persists? If the salesperson keeps talking, or the offer is repeated, or maybe it's more like vague, unwanted advances?
If "no thank you" doesn't work, you need to escalate slightly to firm declarative sentences, "I'm not interested." Is very clear for unsolicited sales calls or maybe unwanted romantic overtures. If someone asks a highly sensitive or perhaps just nosy personal question that you don't want to answer, shut it down cleanly with, "I prefer not to discuss that topic." You owe absolutely no explanation for protecting your privacy.
Good reminder, you don't owe explanations. Okay, shifting back to professional for a second. What about when you need to formally end something, like you're ready to terminate a contract with a supplier or maybe close the loop on a project discussion that just hasn't worked out?
Professionally, you typically use strategic closure language. Something like, "After reviewing our options, we've decided to go in a different direction for this project service." It maintains respect for their past work or effort while clearly confirming the final decision.
Okay, still polite but final.
And if you're ever offered an opportunity, a project, a job, a partnership that fundamentally conflicts with your career path, your ethics, or your core values, be clear about that foundation. "Thank you for the offer, but that particular direction doesn't align with my core values or doesn't align with my long-term professional goals." This establishes your principles as the non-negotiable basis for the refusal.
Powerful, grounding it in your values.
Right.
Okay, so we've armed our listeners with, I don't know, probably well over 50 specific phrases and ways to structure a polite refusal. That's a huge toolkit.
It is.
But as we know, just having the words isn't always enough. The how you say it, that's often the element that makes or breaks whether the boundary actually sticks and whether you do it without causing unnecessary offense. So what are the absolute must-do behavioral principles behind delivering an effective no?
Great question. The very first principle is actually a courtesy that people often overlook, especially when they're feeling anxious about saying no. And that is be prompt.
Be prompt, as in say no quickly.
Yes. A delayed yes one you give because you feel pressured, but then you have to scramble or worse, cancel at the last minute. That is always, always worse and less respectful than giving a quick, early no.
Why is that?
Because if you know deep down that you cannot or should not commit to something, communicating that boundary immediately respects the other person's time. It allows them to move on and find an alternative solution much sooner. Delaying just wastes everyone's time and energy.
Right. Timeliness itself is a form of professionalism and respect. Okay, principle number 2. We absolutely have to fight the urge to over-explain.
Oh, definitely. Be clear and concise. Rambling is the absolute enemy of effective boundary setting.
Why is rambling so bad? It feels like we're trying to be nice by explaining.
It feels like that, but what actually happens when someone delivers this long 5-minute, overly detailed, maybe slightly contradictory explanation for why they can't commit?
They sound hesitant.
Yeah.
Unsure.
Exactly. They sound hesitant, maybe confused, and most critically, all those details often inadvertently invite the requester to start negotiating, to poke holes in the excuse. "Oh, well, if that's the only problem, maybe we could."
You give them openings.
You give them openings you didn't intend. A brief, polite reason is usually sufficient. Say the core refusal phrase, maybe add the brief reason if appropriate, and then this is key, stop talking. Resist the urge to fill the silence.
Let the no land. Okay, and that leads straight into the core emotional principle behind it all, doesn't it? Confidence.
Absolutely. Be firm and confident. Your tone of voice, your body language, if you're in person, your vocal inflection, it all has to match the words you're using.
So no saying I absolutely cannot commit while kind of looking at your shoes and shuffling your feet.
Precisely. If you use a firm phrase like, "I cannot commit to that deadline," but you deliver it with a shaky voice, maybe avoiding eye contact or using a really overly apologetic, hesitant manner, you completely undermine the message. Your conviction, your calm confidence is what validates your boundary. It signals non-verbally that you mean it, and you're not open to being pushed around.
Okay, so confidence is key, but we also want to be polite, maybe empathetic, but you keep saying not overly apologetic. How do we walk that fine line? How do we distinguish between genuine empathy for their situation and unnecessary boundary weakening guilt?
That's a crucial distinction. Empathy is about acknowledging the other person's perspective or need. You know, saying something like, I understand this is an urgent request for you, or thank you again for considering me. I know this project is important. That shows you hear them.
Okay, so that's the empathy part.
Yes. The problem comes with excessive apology, saying, I am so terribly, deeply sorry. I feel just awful that I can't do this for you. That kind of language dilutes your message. It suggests you feel guilty simply for having boundaries.
Makes you sound like you think you're doing something wrong by saying no.
Exactly. A simple, standard, I'm sorry I can't, can function as a social nicety, a polite softener. But you have to avoid compounding apologies. Fundamentally, you do not owe anyone an apology for managing your own time, energy, and resources effectively. It's your right and responsibility.
Right. Manage resources, don't apologize for it. Okay, and finally, to protect our credibility in the long run, the absolute bedrock principle of trust.
Don't lie. Please just don't lie.
Why is honesty so important, even if the little white lie feels easier in the moment?
Because fabricating excuses, especially elaborate or complex ones, claiming you have phantom appointments, mysterious illnesses, sudden family emergencies, it's just the fastest way to completely destroy trust if you get caught out. People often do, eventually.
Yeah, keeping track of lies is exhausting too.
It is. And once that lie is discovered, your reputation for honesty, for integrity, is seriously undermined. Honesty, delivered kindly and concisely, my plate is full, I need to prioritize X, I don't have the bandwidth, is always the most professional and, frankly, the most sustainable route in the long term. When you're honest about protecting your priorities, even if someone's momentarily disappointed, you ultimately gain respect for your integrity.
Okay. Be prompt. Be clear and concise, be firm and confident, be polite but not overly apologetic, and be honest.
Yeah.
These principles really do transform saying no from feeling like this awful moment of conflict into something more like an affirmation of your own strategic value and focus.
Beautifully put. That's exactly it. #, outtry profo. So just to summarize this whole deep dive, the core message really is this. Learning to say no effectively is fundamentally an act of profound self-respect. It's about efficient resource management for your own life and work. By internalizing these techniques we've discussed, by getting better at choosing your commitments more carefully, and by practicing delivering that decline with calm confidence, you dramatically, truly dramatically enhance the value, the meaning, and the quality of every single yes that you do choose to give.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
It makes your yes mean more. So embrace the power of the polite no. And now that you, our listeners, have this pretty comprehensive toolkit, over 50 options we've explored, maybe here's a little challenge for you.
Ooh, I like a challenge.
Which one commitment, maybe something relatively low value or draining that's currently on your plate, which one thing are you going to respectfully decline this week? Which no will you practice saying specifically to free up a little bit of time or energy for something that genuinely excites you or something that aligns better with your real core priorities?
That's a fantastic challenge. Take control of your time, manage your resources consciously, communicate your boundaries with that unwavering, quiet confidence we talked about. You can do it.
Absolutely. We really hope this deep dive has been helpful.
We do.
And as always, we encourage you to like this podcast, share it with anyone else who might struggle with saying no, and please subscribe to this channel, Learn English Lab, for more deep dives into essential topics for real English conversation and advanced skills.
Thanks for tuning in.